For you, the listeners of My JavaScript Story, Loot Crate is offering an opportunity to save 10% on any new subscription at lootcrate.com. Just enter the promo code BRIDGE10 for 10% savings. Loot Crate is one of my favorite things. Every month I get a box in the mail, costs less than $20, and it comes with all kinds of goodies. I have stuff from, just looking at my shelf, Batman, Spider-Man, Ninja Turtles, Back to the Future, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, and much, much more. So if you're a geek, a gamer, anything like that, and you want cool stuff to put around your office, cool t-shirts, comic books, etc., then definitely check out Loot Crate. To save 10% on your new subscription, go to lootcrate.com/Ruby. Again, that's lootcrate.com/Ruby to save 10% on any new subscription. Enter the promo code BRIDGE10 for 10% savings. Hey everybody, and welcome to another My JavaScript Story. This week we're talking to Henrik Joreteg. Henrik, do you want to say hi?
How's it going?
Now, we had you on episode 137 of JavaScript Jabber, which was, like 3.5 years ago.
Yeah, that was quite some time ago, indeed.
Yeah, we talked to you about And Yet.
Mm-hmm.
And
probably some WebRTC stuff or something. I forget
probably.
Exactly.
Yeah, all kinds of stuff. Anyway, we're going to kind of dig into your story, where you are, what you were doing, what you're working on these days, that kind of thing.
Sounds good.
I kind of want to get started really briefly with, since we talked about And Yet, do you want to just kind of fill people in with where that's at these days?
Well, so I'm actually not there anymore as of a few years ago. I kind of went independent and struck out on my own to just kind of do independent consulting and to work on some of my own projects. So for the last, few years, I did that. I moved to Spokane, Washington. So yeah, been enjoying that. It's been going well.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and dig into your story, and let's go back to when you got into programming. How did you get into programming?
So yeah, I'm not one of these guys that kind of started doing it when he was like 8. I liked computers, but I had just kind of a high level interest. And it wasn't until actually after college that I really got into programming at all. I studied business in college. And, I kind of had all these entrepreneurial thoughts and all the interesting business ideas I could come up with all had to do with web-related products. So I actually started a company, this company called Houseflix. And what we did were like early online video tours for houses that were for sale.
Oh, cool.
So we came up with this whole system for like very quickly creating a video of a house. But the point is I needed this whole like web app to manage the whole thing for me. And I really didn't have any money to hire somebody good to do it. I did hire somebody, but it never happened quite as quickly as I wanted. It was kind of a side gig for this person. And eventually I was like, well, how hard could this be? Maybe I could learn how to do it. And so I just kind of dug in and started teaching myself how to do stuff.
Yeah. Awesome.
I mean, at the time, that was actually ColdFusion, which is, these days, I don't know if anybody really uses ColdFusion for anything serious, but maybe they do. I mean, it doesn't really matter what it is. You still kind of learn the basic programming concepts, and I was able to build the app that I wanted. So it was a good start, I guess. Huh.
Nice. I've had a few people actually come to me and talk about doing a ColdFusion related podcast. It was just kind of like for people who are still doing some form of it, and I was like, oh, well, I didn't know people still did it. But
yeah, I mean, I shouldn't dog on it. I mean, the technologies are good for certain things, and it was actually very effective for what I was doing.
Yeah, I mean, if it works, right?
So yeah, exactly.
Well, and a lot of the things that we build have life beyond what we, when we work on it. So
yes, indeed.
So anyway, so you get in there, you're building this app. Was that when you got into JavaScript as well?
I was kind of exposed to JavaScript that way because there were things that I wanted it to do that I couldn't always do, like controlling the video playback and all that kind of stuff. And ColdFusion has these kind of magical tags that will inject JavaScript for you and do certain things.
Right.
But, after a while, I wanted to customize things there too. But I didn't get too deep into the JavaScript side until later. So after about 3 years of trying to make that work, and we filmed a bunch of houses, it was fine, but we just never made enough money to really justify the time and effort.
Right.
So eventually I just kind of dropped it and I sold it to the guy who was actually filming the videos. And I just got a job at Esri, which happened to be in the town I lived at, which is like Some people, they're a huge company, but not everyone knows about it unless they've been around kind of online mapping stuff. But they're one of these big kind of, what do they call it? I can't even think of the term now. But they're like all the cities use them for, where are their pipes and where, where are the forest fires and all this kind of stuff. I mean, it's kind of the de facto standard for a lot of that kind of stuff. And so they happened to be in the town I was living, and they needed a ColdFusion developer. So I got a gig there. And then it was kind of there that I got exposed to more and more JavaScript. And I was kind of asked to do some things involving JavaScript, and I really kind of liked it. So, back then it was all jQuery. And at the time, even then, I was really interested in building kind of more app-like experiences. I don't know if you remember jQTouch.
Yes.
So that was a framework built on jQuery by David Kaneda, who's kind of he's kind of a designer, but also a developer. And so I took that and I paired it with Django and tried to make kind of a CMS that would produce these apps. And so in order to make that work the way I wanted to, I had to do a ton of JavaScript. And so that's when I really kind of started digging into it and trying to figure out how it all worked.
Nice. So jQuery was kind of your first major foray, I guess, into JavaScript. Yeah,
definitely. And it's a nice little gateway drug to the whole thing because, with very little code, you can make interesting things happen on your screen. And then you're like, wait, I can do that? And it's like mind blown,
Yeah. So you kind of get going in this. When we had you on the show, we brought you in to talk about and yet. And I think they were talking about like Ampersand.js and things like that.
Oh, yeah, sure.
What kinds of things have you done with JavaScript that you're particularly proud of?
Man, I've done a lot. In terms of what I'm most proud of, though, I don't know. I hope I can kind of help push the web into this more app space, really. One of the things I've been wanting to do is really just kind of keep narrowing down on patterns that enable, these really fast-loading, very small library applications that will work offline. The whole thing we can now do with PWAs was kind of something that I've been personally working towards and kind of promoting the idea of for a very long time. And so kind of seeing that all come to fruition has been really awesome. Really starting to see that take off is super fun. But yeah, I mean, I did a few things. I wrote a book called Human JavaScript that sold pretty well back in the day. That was all about kind of patterns and stuff. Right. I helped create Ampersand. There was a WebRTC library called Simple WebRTC that I created that kind of took off too. And I think we were the first people to do multi-user video calls between Firefox and Chrome, as far as I'm aware. There were people, they had a demo one that was doing like a direct one-on-one conversation, but I think we were the first people to pull it off with multiple users in between multiple browsers. Right. So that was kind of fun. And then just to wrap that in an API that people could use. People use that for all sorts of interesting things since then. It was really fascinating. Somebody used it to control to basically share a super high power microscope over the internet at a university so that you could control it remotely and then see the result on your screen. And that was all based on Simple WebRTC. So I was like, hey, that's pretty sweet. So I don't know, lots of fun little things. I've given talks and whatnot, but just really trying to promote, the web as an application platform. And at this point, the thing I hope people will know me for is the book that I'm writing right now, actually. So trying to kind of wrap up all my learnings into a book that's primarily focused around Redux. So yeah, I don't know. There's a few things.
Cool. Well, I was going to ask what you're working on now. So why don't you talk about the book and anything else you got going on?
Sure. So about, in September this year, I just finished working with Starbucks. So I helped them kind of re-platform all their existing .NET code to using React and Redux. And ultimately, I was prototyping this. I was kind of begged them to let me prototype this little PWA version of a new interface. And they agreed. And so kind of went off in a corner and did that for a bit. And now that's actually what's powering the entire sign-in experience when you sign in as a rewards member to Starbucks.com. So, as part of that process, we were forced to tackle a lot of really interesting challenges with Redux and React and large teams And a bunch of interesting patterns that we discovered as a result of that, things that I prototyped and then ended up working really well at scale. So, when I finished that in September, I was like, hey, I should kind of package up all these learnings into another book. And so that's kind of what I've been working on. Hopefully that will be done here in another month or two. But yeah, that's one thing I've been doing. Obviously, I'm still doing some consulting independently. So I have people that show up and want to, either get architecture consulting or actually have me write some code for them. But a lot of times, I prefer to work with teams where they have a team internally and they just need some guidance on how to go about building a PWA and how to structure things. And so that kind of consulting has been enjoyable for me too. But I don't know, there's lots of things. In addition to all this, I've actually started my own little donation platform online. So for nonprofits that want to take donations from credit cards from people's phones, I have a system that basically generates a PWA for their organization. So instead of just having a single PWA, it lets them essentially configure a PWA that people can then use to donate. So, they get a subdomain and then people can pull out their phone, type in a URL, and then give with Apple Pay or Google Pay or what have you. And so this is a project I've kind of been working on my own and finally built out to the point where people can actually go sign up for it online now. So, and that's at Speedy.gift is where that's at. The .gift is the domain there.
Nice.
But it's kind of cool. That's been a really interesting project too. I've been able to kind of take a lot of the things that I've learned over the years and apply it to, because it kind of mixes a bunch of things, because it's all real time. So anytime anything changes in the entire application, it gets pushed to the connected clients. So if you can literally sit there in the admin interface of this thing, and as you're uploading a logo or as you're adding a new fundraising project or changing the description or what have you, you can just look at it on your phone and it will just update in front of you like you're designing the thing. And of course, when anybody gives, you kind of see progress toward, those goals move in real time. So, it's pretty interesting to then throw that up. If you have a live fundraising event, it's been pretty effective to put that up on a big projector screen, for example. And then, as people give, they see, they see progress towards this shared goal of raising so much money or whatever. So that's kind of a product that I've built and has started growing. And I'm just kind of seeing some consistent, steady growth there. The hope is that over time that becomes something that provides ongoing revenue for me. But for now, it's just kind of a really cool tool. So I've been enjoying that too. I think so far we've raised like $70,000 through it total, which, is nothing to write home about, but it's also not nothing. So it's kind of fun.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah, so lots of things. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, it's always interesting to see what gets people excited. So,
right. And another area that I don't know if you've seen any of the stuff I've done with the Redux-bundler, but essentially that's a little tool that I've written for organizing Redux applications. And just yesterday, actually, I shared an example of, basically if you structure your app a certain way, you can just decide to run it in a worker. And I've kind of experimented with this kind of stuff in the past, but typically any app that you build that gets, that you're trying to run inside of a worker context, you typically have to change a bunch of stuff and do a bunch of crazy hacks to make it all work. And so the nice thing here is, and the thing that I think is different and unique about this is that it's not actually, you don't really have to change much of anything. So if you build your app the way that I build apps anyway, you can just kind of opt to run them in a worker, which is pretty neat. So the main thread does the actual component tree and runs Preact.
Right.
But then all your Redux code and all the kind of reactions to the state and all your action dispatches and everything, all that stuff, and data fetching, caching, all that stuff gets handled inside the worker. So, to give you a bit of an idea, the main bundle that runs on the UI thread, I think, is 6 kilobytes of code, which is hardly anything. And then, it's about twice that for the stuff that runs in the bundle or in the worker. So. Right. And again, that's, I don't know, that's just other kind of fun side effects of trying to build, kind of well architected stuff. And I just kind of noticed that you would be able to fairly easily just switch this into running in a worker, because it wasn't, directly manipulating DOM inside any of that stuff. So I was like, maybe we should try this. So that's been another kind of fun thing that I've worked on, and that's also how we've how I've built Speedy and how I'm actually deploying this stuff. Not running in a worker actually, but using all the same techniques. So in theory, I could switch it over to run in a worker if I wanted to.
Right. We should get you on the React podcast to talk about that stuff.
Yeah, sure.
Awesome.
Yeah. It's a little weird. I feel like I'm just talking about myself the whole time. I want to ask you all kinds of questions here.
That's the idea. What cool stuff is going on in your world, and at the same time, it also kind of highlights your journey. And I think some people get this idea that the people who are out there contributing to the community, the kinds of people we get on JavaScript Jabber, are these uber special people, and they
I don't believe that.
They do terrific work, but I kind of want to highlight too. It's like, look, if you go out and make some contributions, there's nothing special about them that enabled them to do that, other than that they just went and did it.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things where you keep pursuing something and you find patterns that work and you share it, and someone might say, "Hey, that's terrible. Why are you doing that? You should be doing this." And then if that happens, like, you just won. Like, now you know what to do and you learn something.
Yep.
So I think the biggest danger is not putting anything out there, because then no one has any opportunity to actually see what you can do or see how you're thinking, or, be able to share. I don't know. They might find something useful in your ideas. I think that's the way it works. I think you have to kind of engage. If you're just kind of sitting in an office at home by yourself and never publishing anything, then no one's going to know who you are, right? Not that that's the goal, but it's just a natural side effect of trying to do things and share and explore.
Yep, absolutely. So the last segment of the show is the picks.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have some things you want to shout out about?
Do you run your own freelance business? Or maybe you're thinking about picking up some business on the side? Well, then you need FreshBooks. FreshBooks is the quickest and easiest way to get invoices out to your clients. It's easy to use. It works anywhere, available from any device, on the desktop, iPhone, iPad, Android, and all of your data is backed up and secure. And it makes it really easy to get organized and get paid. You'll be tracking time, logging expenses, and invoicing your clients in no time. You can also save time billing, freeing up several days per month to focus on the work that you love, and you get paid faster. FreshBooks customers are paid on average 5 days faster because there's a link on the invoice that says "Pay me now." And it's a great way to grow your business. Plus, FreshBooks is offering a 30-day trial. That's right, 30-day trial if you try them out. So go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter devchat in the "How did you hear about us" section. Once again, for a 30-day trial, go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter devchat in the "How did you hear about us" section.
Yeah, I don't know. I think my tools of choice right now, and some things that I'm excited about. So obviously Preact is a big one for me. I love kind of the programming model that React allows, but just to be able to kind of take the essence of that in 3 kilobytes is just awesome. And there's a few little API changes that I actually like that are a little bit different. I don't use the compatibility stuff. And so it's just a super lightweight little UI framework for rendering, mostly in my case, functional components.
Mm-hmm.
So super clean, super easy, works really well, super performant. I haven't had any issues with it. So that's just that's been huge for me. Which is also why I donate to his Open Collect thing every month, because I think it's the kind of thing I want to support. So that would definitely be one. The other I think I'd like to mention is Parcel.js. I've done an awful lot with Webpack over the years, and I've done kind of every various contortion of all these things that you can do in the config, and the thing that has always bothered me slightly is just the amount of time it takes to get it all set up. And I know I'm not the first to mention this, obviously, but
nope.
And things have gotten a lot better over the years. However, I think the concept of what Parcel is trying to do is just magic. I mean, the idea of for one, starting with an HTML file is brilliant. The HTML part of Webpack has always kind of felt like a bit of a tack-on sort of thing. Ultimately, you have to figure out what these file names are and make sure they show up in your HTML file, right? And Parcel kind of flips that on its head and say your entry point becomes your HTML file, which I think is brilliant. And then it, kicks out a fully populated HTML file. So it kind of does the templating of that for you. But it lets you maintain that control of, if you want to add a meta tag or whatever, you just do it on the input version, but then it will go and parse that and it will grab and build whatever needs to be built based on that. So that's been like hugely awesome. It's still fairly early in that project. I mean, there's a few little bugs and things that bother me. For example, they don't yet do tree shaking, but I think that stuff's just a matter of time. I think the basic model is really sound, and the super fast bundling times, especially during development, is just really sweet. So huge props to Devin Govett for that, and for, hopefully that keeps becoming more and more awesome. So that would be definitely another one.
Nice. We've been trying to line up a JavaScript Jabber episode on Parcel, so.
Yeah, no, it's sweet. It's really great. Another one that I think is kind of an unsung hero, and it kind of gets some attention these days, but I think Rollup is also similarly awesome. I've actually used that quite a bit as well instead of Webpack for various projects. And, primarily it's kind of pitched as a tool for libraries, but there's nothing stopping you from using it for applications as well. And I've done that a decent amount. I like the cool thing about Rollup is you can just kind of give it multiple configs. So instead of passing it a config file that exports an object, you can export an array of objects, and each object is then a separate config. And so if you're doing things like what I've been messing with, where you're trying to essentially split code between a main UI thread and a worker, you can just have it two configs and have it build two files. And the name of the worker file that's generated, so then you can just kind of instantiate the worker file from your main file, and you're good to go, right? You can create the worker that way.
Yep.
That's been super great for kind of hacking around with worker stuff. And the neat thing about that too is if you have a library that's all written ES6 with like ES6 modules, and with the tree shaking that comes with Rollup, you kind of get this natural split and deduplication of code, because if you don't reference it in your main bundle, it's not going to show up in your main bundle.
Right.
So even if you're pulling pieces from a shared library, you can still end up with distinct separate pieces that only have the relevant portions of code that you actually need for that context, which is pretty sweet. So big fan of that. And just the tree shaking aspect is really magical too, in that sense. I really. And the other aspect that I think is underappreciated with Rollup is the fact that it kind of flattens everything out. I don't know if you saw any of the numbers for some of the analysis that's been done by some of the folks on the Chrome team about just kind of resolving dependencies in a typical Webpack build. There's an awful lot of overhead in just kind of sorting out the requires, if you will. And so what Rollup does that's unique is it kind of flattens that whole structure out. So which is, that you can run into some interesting bugs at times, but by and large, that also dramatically speeds up execution of your code, which is really awesome. So I've been really impressed with Rollup as a result. So that's another one that I would throw out there.
Very cool.
Something I've been messing around with is not necessarily programming, but is kind of related to knowledge work in general, is this whole idea of spaced repetition systems. Have you done anything with this? Have you heard that term? So the basic gist is that, we have, the way our brains work is there's like an optimal interval where we should be exposed to something again in order to remember it in the long term.
Okay.
So there's research about this that says, there's these kind of known intervals that if something is really easy, you might need to see it again in 10 days for it to stick. And over time, as things get easier, you can stretch that interval out. And, it's basically flashcards, right? But flashcards with brains behind it. So the interesting thing is, over time, you kind of create this library of flashcards in this software. There's software that does this for you. The one I use is called Anki, A-N-K-I. But the neat thing is, like, the stuff that you put in there will end up in your brain as long as you review your cards for that day, right? Like if you keep staying on top of reviewing whatever cards are due at the time, based on when you last saw things and how difficult it was to recall the answer, or if you got it wrong. So it will kind of adjust for you when it thinks you need to see it again. And I don't know, it's just something I've really enjoyed getting into recently, and I think it's something that's really powerful for knowledge workers. There's a lot of things that we have to, that we could benefit from committing to memory, and this essentially lets you pick what you're going to remember, which is really powerful. So for what it's worth, that's been cool. I recommend trying that out, experimenting with it if you haven't.
That sounds really interesting. And I have a number of things that I'm trying to learn, and it's not all technical either. So
right, absolutely. I do random like history facts and like dates from important events and just stuff that I want to remember. In vocabulary, it's great for vocabulary. If you come across some new word in an article that you don't know, and you stop for 2 seconds to throw it in a card, then next time you come across that word, you're going to know what it means, right?
Yep.
So that's been cool.
Yeah, I bought the Pimsleur system for learning languages. I bought their thing for Japanese.
Oh, right on.
And so, I think that might be interesting to drill myself on that stuff.
Yeah, and they do have ways to kind of import collections of cards that other people have made. So, if you wanted to do Spanish vocab or something, like there's collections out there you can drop in. But the concept, I think, is really interesting.
Yeah, the other thing that appeals to me, on the language front too, is I speak fluent Italian, but my vocabulary is pretty limited to a couple of very specific topics. Sure. I went to Italy as a missionary, so I speak Italian. And I can talk about religion, all day long. Yeah. I have all that vocabulary.
Right.
But, I talk to other programmers and we have to switch back to English because I just don't have it. And so
I do the exact same thing in Swedish. Someone will figure out that I'm Swedish at a conference and they'll start talking Swedish. And it's fine until they go technical. And all of a sudden I'm like, we're going to have to do English. Sorry.
Yeah, I have to explain to them, no, I was a missionary there. And so I can talk to you about getting around town and I can talk to, all the living there stuff and all of the religious stuff, but anything else I don't have the vocabulary for.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yep. Anyway, I'm going to jump in here with a few picks. So I'm really into board games, and my wife is into board games. It's funny because for our birthdays we tend to buy each other board games, and so
nice.
Her birthday was this last week, and I bought her the Harry Potter Hogwarts Battles, which is a collaborative deck building game.
Nice.
And it's really, really fun. If you're a fan of Harry Potter, it kind of adds that flavor to it. But honestly, it's just a fun game to try and figure out how to, defeat all the villains before they, defeat you, I guess. So anyway,
nice.
I'm going to pick that. And then the other thing that I'm going to pick, I've been working on some stuff regarding the website and also regarding some courses. So I'm going to pick some things around that. First of all, this episode's going to come out way after React Dev Summit, but we did talk about React. So if you're interested in React Dev Summit, it was in March. You can still get the videos. You have to pay for them until about 6 months after the conference. And then what happens is I start releasing them publicly to build publicity for the next one. Is basically the way that works. So if you want them now and you don't want to wait another 3 or 4 months, when this comes out, then definitely check that out, reactdevsummit.com. Same thing with JavaScript, JS Dev Summit. This should come out right around when that's being held. You might have missed it by a week. I need to go check my schedule. I just don't remember the exact dates on this. But that's going to be held May 14th through the 18th. So definitely check that out as well. We're going to have a whole bunch of speakers come and talk to us about JavaScript. And anyway, so those are coming up. And then on the website, I had a custom WordPress theme built. And the more I've used it, the more I've found limitations in what I want to do with it. And since it's custom, I have to go in and actually code in PHP to make it do what it has to do, which is kind of a fun departure from what I typically do because I'm usually doing Rails or Angular or React. But the flip side of that is that sometimes it's a pain to figure out this stuff. So I'm going to be switching to a new theme, and it is the newspaper theme. I got it on ThemeForest. So you can definitely go check that out as well. Pretty happy with it so far. I've just been playing with it on my staging server. And so we'll go fiddle with that and then see what happens. But anyway, so that's all the stuff that I've been playing with lately.
Right on.
On the courses, the How to Get a Job course is pretty much finalized at this point as we're talking. The next course I'm going to do is automating your development processes. And so we're going to be pulling in tools and showing you how to set up CI and continuous deployment and all that stuff.
so that, all this stuff just kind of magically happens. You don't have to spend a ton of time really worrying about it, because I find a lot of people wind up doing a lot of this stuff manually, and they don't like doing it anyway. And so it's, okay, well, why do I spend all this time on this thing that I don't really love, instead of writing code and doing the stuff that we do love? So
right, totally.
Anyway,
on that end, I think Cypress is pretty amazing too. Have you used Cypress at all?
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
I'm a huge fan of that. So I've been using for end-to-end testing. It's phenomenal. So.
Yeah, we've had Gleb Bamatov on Adventures in Angular and Ruby, or not Ruby Rogues, JavaScript Jabber to talk about it. So.
Nice. Yeah, that guy is a phenomenal developer. He's awesome.
Yep. All right. Well, if people want to see what you're working on, they want to keep up with you, do you have a blog or a Twitter?
Yeah, I do have a blog and Twitter. I'm Joreteg.com is my blog, Joreteg. My Twitter handle and GitHub handle is just my full name, so it's Henrik Joreteg. So Henrik Joreteg. But yeah, it's most everything new and interesting I do ends up showing up on Twitter somehow. So that's the best way to keep up with what I'm working on. But yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming. I'll get you the links to get you on React Roundup. And
sounds good.
We'll catch everybody next week.
All right. Thanks so much. See you later.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.